Today on CityCast Chicago, Lunar New Year is coming up at the end of the month, but if you're hoping to include some of Chicago's best dumplings in your celebrations, you might want to start looking now. Luckily, we've got a guide for that. It's Wednesday, January 8th. I'm Simona Licea in for Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Last year, Jacoby talked with Kevin Pang, a food writer and author of A Very Chinese Cookbook, about the best places to find dumplings in Chicago, especially for Lunar New Year.
Kevin, welcome back to CityCast.
Jacoby, it's great to talk to you again.
Hey, it's always great to have you. Obviously, I love dumplings all year. I know you do. It's one of the easiest to grab and go foods that we have in Chicago. I put it next to a good taco as something you can just grab and leave the store, right? But what is the significance of a good dumpling during the Lunar New Year celebration time?
Well, the interesting thing about dumplings, as with a lot of food during Lunar New Year, is that a lot of times we eat it because of the significance of it, because of what it represents, okay? So here's an example. The word fish in Chinese is yu, and it sounds like the word for surplus, meaning like a surplus of money. So we like to eat fish because we think it might bring us surplus, okay?
Like prosperity and good fortune for the year.
Yeah, exactly. So we it's funny, we have a homophone-based diet, you know, but another example is that if we eat tofu, a square cube of tofu almost looks like a field. And we would eat tofu hoping that it would bring us a good harvest in the new year.
Got it.
You know? So, I mean, if you look at foods like dumplings, I mean, number one, it's delicious. The act of wrapping dumplings with your loved ones, it's almost like, you know, Mexican families where they're wrapping tamales and sort of eating it, you know, at many different times of the year. So for dumplings, I think there is the familial aspect, Jacoby, of wrapping it and then sharing in the meal together. And you can also make the case that if you look at a dumpling, it looks a little bit like a gold bullion, right? And so maybe the more dumplings we would eat, maybe, you know, the more money would be coming through our bank account. So that's not a bad thing.
And you'll find a good, like I said, a good variety, a good selection of dumplings across Asian restaurants in Chicago, whether it's Chinese, whether it's Korean, whether it's Japanese. One of the things you mentioned is the familial connection. And I imagine that goes across different countries. But for your own personal upbringing, what do you remember about maybe the process of learning to make or making dumplings with your family members?
I will give you sort of the perfect illustration of that, Jacoby. So the first time I brought my then girlfriend, now wife, home to meet my parents. Okay. So I was really nervous. And so she comes in through the door and, you know, a lot of hugs, a lot of meeting and sort of sizing up, I would assume. And then within 15 minutes, my mother was showing my girlfriend, now wife, how to fold dumplings. Like she was already doing that. It was like on a Saturday afternoon. And she said, just come sit and you know, let me just show you how to do this. Put the filling there, you put the crimp here, you put the fold here. And so it's almost it's an act of welcoming into the family, making dumplings. So that was something I won't soon forget.
I love that people can get a taste of that sort of inner family life of watching you and your family, you and your dad making recipes together. I've seen a few of them online. I told you earlier, it was the reason I was a few minutes behind because I got lost in the playlist. But let's stay on dumplings here. What makes a dumpling a really good one? Like, what is your criteria? What are you looking for when you're eating good dumplings? Because I feel like it's only a small amount of ingredients, but you know, not everybody can get it right every time.
That's what I love about dumplings, especially as a way to show off how good you are as a cook, because there's not a lot of margin for error. You know, it's almost like a roast chicken. It's very easy to screw up a roast chicken, and it's kind of hard to make it taste really good. So when it comes to dumplings, look, I can tell you the things I don't like is that, number one, the balance of filling is off. Whether it's like too little filling, there is such thing to have too much filling as well, too. It's sort of like, you know, it's kind of like hard to chew on it. I think that becomes a problem. And when I talk about balance of filling, I'm also talking about the flavors of it, okay? Now, a lot of times when we're making dumplings, we would combine, say, pork with Napa cabbage, right? Now, if
Mm-hmm.
you skimp too much on the pork and you put too much Napa cabbage, then the whole thing becomes very soggy, and then you don't taste any meat, and that's not good. So I think a balance of ingredients matters. I also talk about a balance of flavor. If it's not well seasoned, if it's a bland dumpling, no one likes that. And then finally, I look at the wrapper itself. Is it leaking? You know, if you don't crimp it correctly, the filling will just spill over. If it's too thick, who likes a thick, chewy dumpling? No one likes that, right? So I like something that's very sheer, that doesn't fall apart. I'm talking about the wrapper here. I like it to have this very almost a luscious quality. It's a very slippery quality when you're biting through. And, and I look at the different sauces too. You know, do you dip it in soy sauce, dip it in vinegar, do you dip it in chili oil? I mean, it's all a matter of personal preference, but I think those are the things I look for in a good dumpling.
We're going to ask you a little bit later about your own personal recipe, like how you like to make them best. But let's start with some places around the Chicagoland area. And so we can even go categories, right? Like when we're thinking about grabbing dumplings, if we're on the go, somewhere like for lunch, for example, you got a great lunch spot for us, Kevin?
Well, I live on the North Shore, so I live in Wilmette, but the place that I love to go is that's close by in Evanston is Shang's Noodles. They make their own noodles. They do house-made dumplings as well too. Great pot stickers. So I think that place is a place that I think is really, really good. I think in terms of going to Chinatown and downtown Chicago, QXY dumplings. That place is they are a dumpling specialist. And they'll have like a dozen varieties of dumplings. The best part is that you can also get it frozen to go. So if you want to eat it, if you want to reheat it or boil it at home, you can do that as well too. So QXY dumplings is really, really fantastic.
If you're reheating dumplings, what's best practices? Because when we did a best tacos episode, Michelle, our producer, put me on to let me know the best way to reheat that. And I was like, all right, just put me on game. If I want to reheat some dumplings, what's the best way I should go about that?
Well, I think there are two ways. You can either boil them, and I think that's very easy. But then I think if you want something's going to retain a little bit of chew on the dumpling wrapper, I think steaming it is the best way to go. If you've got a bamboo steamer, even better. I understand that it takes a little bit longer time to steam than to boil it, but I think both methods would yield a really good dumpling.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
All right, so we've gotten a few places. One spot in Evanston, we got a spot in Chinatown. Keep the list rolling. If I got a large group with me or I'm trying to show off a spot, where are you taking me next?
I got two more places I think you should go. So first off is a somewhat unexpected place called Chef Special Cocktail Bar. And I've been on the record talking about how much I love this place. It is from Chef Jason Vincent, who opened up Giant.
Hey, that's one of my favorite restaurants in the city.
Oh, it's so good. It's so great. And, I was a little bit skeptical. It's like, I wonder what they're going to be doing. What is Jason Vincent opening up an American Chinese restaurant? And I got to say, Jacoby, it is legit. It is good. He's executing American Chinese food at such a high level. I think their egg rolls are the best in the world. I mean, I really, truly think that. Well, I should qualify that by saying they're American-style egg rolls. Like the really sort of crunchy, crispy. I love it so much. But in terms of dumplings, they will do a version of pot stickers that I think is just top notch. So I think you definitely got to go to Chef Special Cocktail Bar. And then I'm going to mention actually not one more place. I'm going to mention two more places. I think Ming Hin. They've got multiple locations in the suburb. They've got a couple of locations downtown. The one I go to is in Chicago, Chinatown. They are a dim sum parlor. And if you want things like shrimp dumplings, shoo mai, pot stickers, that's a fantastic place to go. And I should say that at Ming Hin, it's more of a Hong Kong, Cantonese, Southern China style of dumplings that you would find at Ming Hin.
If I'm looking on the menu and I see dumpling, pot sticker, gyoza, I might think to myself, well, those all kind of seem very similar, sort of a filling wrapped around. Well, what are your basic differences between like a dumpling, a pot sticker, a gyoza?
Dumpling is a somewhat umbrella term for any sort of meat or filling wrapped in dough, right?
Right.
I mean, you can have pierogies. A pierogi is a dumpling as well too. I mean, the differences are really going to be in the filling inside, right?
Okay.
We're mostly talking about a wheat flour based wrapper that's either boiled or steamed or fried or pan seared. So the term dumpling is a very inclusive and almost too broad of a term, right?
I got you.
So I would say that if you go to a restaurant, you should actually ask either your server or ask the chef, could you tell me more about this style of dumpling? They would be more than happy to engage in you for them to share in their culture and to tell you a little bit about their dumplings. And so, I am all for talking to chefs and to understand more about their food culture. I think they really enjoy that.
I love that. You got one more place on the list that you want to make sure CityCast folks stop by.
I do. I'm on record of talking about Shanghai Terrace. This has been a place that's open this is at the Peninsula Hotel. It is fine dining Cantonese. And I think it's been open for 22 years. It's been under the radar just because it's been around for so long. But there are very few restaurants that is doing sit down, fine dining, Michelin level Chinese food in Chicago, much less in America. And I think Shanghai Terrace just has a really, really good version of it. I had a shumai there. I had a xiaolongbao, which is their soup dumpling. That's the dumplings where you put in your mouth and it bursts this incredibly savory soup inside your mouth, and you have to like seal your lips, otherwise the soup would come bursting out. And they just do a fantastic version of soup dumplings at Shanghai Terrace, and I'm a big fan of that restaurant.
That's been on my list. It's definitely a spot I want to stop by because that's one of those appetizers that if I see it on your menu, I am likely to grab it. But if you are trying to grab something to go home, you mentioned a restaurant earlier that'll give them to you frozen. Is there a brand or another restaurant where you could get good dumplings frozen and take them home with you?
You know, there are so many brands out there. If you go to 88 Jefferson, the huge new supermarket down in Chinatown, if you go to Skokie International Market, another new Asian supermarket there are so many different brands. I don't think one stands out over the rest. I will say that if you go to that place I mentioned earlier, QXY Dumplings, and that is on 2000 South Wentworth, I think that's the best way to go.
Okay. We mentioned your book earlier in the conversation, A Very Chinese Cookbook. It came out last year, named one of the best cookbooks of all of 2023 by the New York Times. This is the time when they add in the so what is your favorite dumpling recipe to prepare either alone with your family?
My favorite by far is the shumai. And let me tell you what the shumai is. It is a pork and shrimp dumpling. It is open face, which means that it is not sealed. You basically take this cylinder of luscious, savory, seasoned, chopped pork. I like pork belly because who doesn't like a little bit of fat, with shrimp, and you chop it up minced until it becomes this really toothsome, almost like bouncy texture when you bite in, okay? And then you wrap it on basically around the sides and on the bottom, and so it's open topped. And when you steam it and you dip it in either chili oil or soy sauce, I mean, it is to me the meatiest and most flavorful dumpling of them all. And I will judge how good your dim sum restaurant is by the quality of your shumai. And if that's good, then that bodes well for the rest of the dishes to come. So I will judge you on your shumai. And we have a recipe in the book, A Very Chinese Cookbook from America's Test Kitchen, that was, developed by one of our ace cooks, Brian Roof. And it is just probably the one thing that I will eat 60 dumplings in one sitting, and I'll eat 60 of those shumai in one sitting if I could.
Is the video of you and your father making shumai, the Shumai 101, is that the recipe y'all are making?
That's the one. Yeah, my dad and I have a YouTube series called Hunger Pangs, because if your last name is Pang and you don't do a food show, you're really missing out. So it's on YouTube called Hunger Pangs, and our very first episode was me and my dad making those very shumai, and it is one of my favorite things to eat.
Kevin, I appreciate you making time for CityCast. Every time you stop by, I leave hungrier than when the conversation started. It means the world to us, my friend.
Thanks, Jacoby. Nice to talk to you.
Now, you could get some of those dumplings on us. One of the spots we mentioned, Ching Shang Huan, aka QXY, is one of the restaurants featured in CityCast Chicago's restaurant giveaway. In case you missed it, we are giving away $1,500 in restaurant gift cards to one lucky winner on Instagram. Basically, you're getting free meals at 12 of our favorite restaurants, including QXY, Bracero in Westtown, Weston's Coffee in Jefferson Park, and so much more. Basically, it's a year's worth of CityCast Chicago's favorite restaurants. It's super easy to enter. Just head to the link in our show notes and follow the directions on the Instagram post. The deadline is January 17th, but I wouldn't wait. Just do it now if you can. And of course, we got to end the show with some good news. If you still have a Christmas tree up, no shame for me, I get it. But instead of just throwing it away, consider giving your natural tree to the Urban Growers Collective in South Chicago because they want to feed it to their goats. The Sun-Times has a great story with some adorable goat photos. Apparently, the pine needles are super healthy for them and the trees keep them active and happy, and I am here for a happy goat, friends. Check the link in the show notes to learn more about how to donate your tree and, of course, to see those goat pics. That's it for today on CityCast Chicago. Jacoby will be back in the host chair tomorrow with the rest of the team while we play a Chicago-themed game of Would You Rather. It's a fun one. So definitely come back, and we'll talk to you then.